So what we're going to be working on today is just kind of a fun little aside project. It's nothing intense, but we already know how to do the grid method, so we're going to use that grid method and kind of break it on purpose to see what happens. So what you have is basically a piece of paper here, and we probably won't be using the whole thing. You'll end up cropping it a little bit, and that's fine. You've got your piece of paper. You've got your selfie photo that you took. There's mine. It's gorgeous, I know. You've got a ruler and pencil, right? That's all you need. Later on, if you want to color your picture, you're welcome to. You like that? It's a good look, right? So anyway, so here's what you're going to do. First thing is first. Take your photograph, all right? And if you would, just like you were before, just like you were if you were to do the regular grid method, what I want you guys to do is go ahead and we're going to grid off your photograph. Now, I'm going to leave it up to you. You're the artist, and again, this is kind of just for fun. But what I want you to do is go ahead and grid off your photograph, and I'll let you decide if you want to do it every half an inch, every, I don't know what, whole inch. You could do a whole inch if you wanted to. No, just use a pencil, that's fine. It's a black and white photograph, so it'll show up just fine. For mine, I'm thinking, I don't know, I could do a 1-inch grid. That might be a little easier. Maybe I'll do a 1-inch grid. Why not? A 1-inch grid for me. And again, you're just going through and gridding off your paper, whether it's 1 inch or half an inch. So as you guys are going along, just go ahead and make off your grid. Like I say, it could be a whole inch, it could be a half an inch, it could be a fourth of an inch. I wouldn't go much smaller than that. Frankly, the project doesn't require it. It's just for fun. So I will tell you this. There are two different styles of Cubism. Technically there's three, but that's a whole different story. But there's two different styles of Cubism we're going to talk about today. There's analytical, and then there's synthetic. Analytical Cubism would be the idea, and we'll talk more about it a little later on, but would be the idea of kind of moving around a model. Like let's say you had somebody sitting and posing, and I would move around them, and I would kind of like divide up my canvas and break it apart, and I draw these little fractal pieces going around my figure. Synthetic Cubism would be purposefully trying to kind of abstract a figure. So, you know, my head, maybe I would start with a big circle, because it's kind of abstracted and simplified, minimalist. Then I could throw on a weird triangle, and I could kind of start slicing my face apart here. That would be more of a synthetic style Cubism. And again, we're going to get much more into it. This is just kind of an entry gate here. But for right now, like I said, we're just going to do a fun little project. This is not true Cubism by any sense of the word. But it is a fun way of kind of just messing around a little bit. Like I said, we're going to work on this project for today, and then we're going to wrap it up tomorrow. It's just a 2-day, quickie little project. You are welcome to add color to yours. You're welcome to do yours in black and white. It is totally up to you. When you're done, you will scan these and turn these in online, though, just so you know ahead of time. When you're done with your grid on your photograph, though, just kind of hang out for a second. Do not start gridding your paper, your drawing paper. Don't start doing that yet, because we're going to do something a little bit different. We would go through and think about our comic book panel and say, okay, well, now that I have a 1-inch by 1-inch grid, or whatever you have, then for my picture here, my piece of paper, maybe I would enlarge that to a 2-inch or a 5-inch or whatever. And if you were doing like a mural, this is a really good way, if you don't have a projector, it's a really good way of at least getting some basic lines down, so then you can kind of freehand the rest. But we're not doing the grid method. In fact, we're going to do kind of this kind of messed up version of Cubism. And like I said, stressing, this is not technical Cubism, but it's just kind of something fun to do. So take a second and kind of look at your photograph and take heed of how many lines you have. So for mine, for example, it looks like, let's see. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4. I've got 4 lines here going across, and that looks like I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 lines there, right? So kind of get a ballpark idea of what you have to work with, okay? No. So while we were doing the grid method, if you found that it was kind of hard to keep that kind of grid together, it's a little bit of a pain in the butt, right? It's not the easiest thing in the world, especially, let's be honest, especially using our ruler to make sure those lines are all perfectly straight. And we talked about how to use a T-square properly, but even then, sometimes you still end up with lines that are slightly cattywampus, and we don't like that. But for this project, we love it, okay? So here's what you're gonna do. So take your piece of paper, we're just gonna use the literal edge of the paper, it's easier that way. Okay, and let's see here. So if I take my piece of paper here is 8.5 inches wide. I'm going to bet yours is the same, considering it's the exact same paper. Now, here's the thing. I'm going to let you guys decide, and you can truly choose what you want to do. I'm going to let you guys decide. Either A, you can do the exact same grid for your picture. So in that case, you don't have to enlarge anything. You can just literally go ahead and make some little tick marks. That's fine. Or if you want to double your space, again, I'm doing an inch grid here. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 inches across. So I could try, let's see, can't do 2 inches, but I could do a 1.5 inch grid. You get the idea. If you want to do the math, go for it. If you don't. This is just for funsies, so don't kill yourself. So I'm going to do, for mine, I'm going to do the exact same grid. It's going to be the exact same size. But here's the big kicker, okay? So I know I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 inches across, right? So I'm going to go ahead here. I'm going to make a little mark here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But I'm going to stop on that side. That's a beautiful picture, right? I am not going to line up on the bottom and make perfectly straight lines. All I'm doing is putting little tick marks right there. I'm going to do the same thing going down on the side to match the number of squares that I have on the side. Does that make sense? Kind of, sort of, maybe? Cool. Go for that real quick, and then I'll tell you the next step. But like I said, don't finish your grid. All you're doing is putting little tick marks where you want to start. Cool?
Can I crop this?
We will whenever we're all done, yes.
What, like the original that I think?
What's that? Oh, the original? Oh, yeah. If you want to crop the original, that's fine. Totally. All right. So at this point, you should have your photograph, which is all gridded off, nice and pretty. You should have your background piece of paper, which has these little tick marks on it. And again, maybe you went through and expanded your grid. Maybe you want to make it 2 inches long. That's fine. Maybe instead you just went exactly the same. So I did a 1 inch by 1 inch grid. Then I'm doing a 1 inch by 1 inch grid over here. Here's the difference, okay? Again, we're going to do kind of this synthetic-esque cubism, and it's still not technically synthetic cubism. But what we're going to do is this. We're going to purposefully mess up our grid. Purposefully, okay? Now here's the thing. The only kicker to this, and you can make your lines as like angled and jacked up as you want. The only kicker is your lines cannot crisscross at all. So for example, now obviously they will with the actual grid. But what I'm saying is, so let's say I make a line like this here. I'm going to do this here. It's kind of, you can tell it's kind of angled a little bit. Right? So there's my line. It's definitely not a straight line, right? Now the key is this. I could not do my next line where it crosses over. You get it? So you cannot cross that line. But I can get as close as I want to and make almost like a little pyramid or something. That's A-okay. What? That's okay. Yep. So go ahead and make the worst possible grid, but you cannot cross your lines. Is the only thing I ask, as far as the vertical versus the horizontal. Cool? So go for it. Mess it up. The vertical and horizontal can cross. Yeah. Vertical and horizontal can cross. It's just your verticals cannot cross. Your horizontals cannot cross, but they can cross each other. Yeah. Yes. Yes, please. So when you're all done, you'll end up with something that looks akin to this here. This is my grid. And again, you can see it is totally messed up. It is not a good grid, but still nothing is kind of crossing over, right? You can tell that there are the same number of squares, and that's the big key, right? I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 across, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 all the way across, and I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 going down, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 going down, right? So the same number of squares are here, they're just not squares. They're very poor lines. All right, so here's the deal. What you guys are going to do is just like with our grid method, okay? Just like with your grid method here, we're going to go through one square at a time. The only difference is in our head, we're going to let our head kind of be the computer, right? In our head, we're going to say, okay, each square along the way, right, is going to be slightly skewed. So for example, when I get to, and keep in mind, your squares may not line up. And again, just like with the grid method, that's A-okay. So let's say I get down to here. I get down to this second one down here. So what I see is kind of a little outline right there. So I'm going to throw down right like that. Then I get to this one. Looks like I've got kind of a line from here to here and kind of over. So something like that. There's an eyebrow here. Some wrinkles because I'm getting old and close to death. And some hair follicles that have struggled. They are struggling, man. They are trying. All right, so then I'm just going to kind of keep going and try my best to match this panel. So again, the key is this. The key to this kind of game we're playing is you want to be able to draw. You want to be able to draw exactly what you see. It's going to be skewed, it's going to be messed up, and that's okay. As you're going along, the first step is just simply getting your drawing on there. The second step is to go back through and either add in color using colored pencils or crayons or whatever the hell you want, or just simply adding in shadow and value, right? You have a black and white copy of your photo, so you can already see the actual value that's there, right? But slowly and surely go through and start drawing one square at a time, and then adding in shading and color if you want to. You have all of today and all of tomorrow, so take your time with it. When you're all done, you're going to go, you're going to go back through and you're going to kind of clean up your grid a little bit so that all you're left with is this really kind of jacked up, angular, messed up looking picture. That's kind of our goal.